Okay, now let's look at the 4 dimensions of service management. So we mentioned in the guiding principle, think and work holistically, that the 4 dimensions were a good sort of plug-in for us to sort of think the bigger picture. Yeah, think about all the things that might be relevant. Yeah, all the things we need to consider if we're changing something. Yeah, if we're creating something new. And as I said before, even if we're decommissioning and retiring something. So anything that can affect our products and services, we need to consider those 4 dimensions. Okay, so organisations and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, value streams and processes. Okay, so perhaps that internal view of what we need to do. But of course, any organisation cannot isolate itself from things which may happen outside of its direct control. Those sort of external factors or those external influences that might have an implication which might help or hinder what we're planning to do. So we need to respond to those and sometimes maybe also build some of that into our thinking at the outset. So before we look at the sort of that internal view of the 4 dimensions and those different dimensions, let's just quickly look at those other factors, yeah, around the edges, often referred to as external factors, okay, with the acronym of PESTLE. You can see P for political, E for economical, S for social, T for technology, L for legal, and E for environmental. So things that can affect what we're planning to do, or maybe affect our consumers, which indirectly may affect us as a provider organisation. So let's look at political. So political factors could be, for example, a change in government. A change in government may be that they've come to power with a manifesto that potentially has all sorts of changes in terms of the country and the law. Things like tax law, for example, could have an implication on organisations. Economical factors, so things that affect the exchange rate. It makes it more expensive to import or export depending on your line of business. Recession, yeah, where disposable income is reduced, so people are spending less money, which reduces maybe the sort of demand on your existing products and services. Where maybe your consumer is feeling that they're under some cost pressures, so they're interested now in doing sort of things more efficiently rather than maybe investing in new technology. Okay, so economical factors can have an impact directly or indirectly on the provider organisation. Social factors, so this could be sort of social trends away from a particular type of service or towards a particular type of service. This could be where brand association may be possibly tarnished through bad press. People want to distance themselves from it. And of course, there's also things in this social sort of factor around sort of demographics and of course, where people are available for recruitment as an example. So if you've got an organisation that needs to grow quickly and that needs to recruit and onboard lots of current hot skills, but you're in a part of the country where actually there are not very many people around who fit that particular sort of requirement, then you may need to consider moving to areas of the country where maybe actually you've got more access to those sort of skills. So those are some of the considerations in social factors. Of course, technology factors, well, new technology comes along, okay? Currently, we see technology changing very fast. So new technology can come along, which maybe opens up opportunities, a competitive advantage to do things in a different way. We might want to sort of exploit that quickly. Equally, we might have technology that we're pretty much dependent on and that technology starts to become obsolete. We get notification that the technology may be going out of support, so we need to change. Okay, so sometimes our vendors will give us a warning that a particular technology is going out of support and we need to respond to that. Legal factors, so changes in law. So a change in employment law, for example, if we were to move to a 4-day week, that has quite a big implication on most organisations. And if you think of those that rely on shift working as an example, would obviously be quite an impact. The changes in law around sort of customer data and protection of customer data, again are sort of legal things that the organisation has to respond to, which it might not have been planning to do, but has to respond. And of course, environmental factors, we're all potentially at risk from climate change. So in terms of our organisational sort of resilience, yeah, we need sometimes to respond to adverse events that may occur through things like climate change. And of course, for a lot of organisations now, under pressure to demonstrate its commitment to the environment and to do things in a more sort of environmentally friendly way. Okay, so some data centres, for example, are now trying to actually generate power through sort of clean sources of power, as an example of responding to some of those environmental factors. Because certainly in time, I think, again, going back to how people associate with brands, brands that don't have a good record in terms of their approach to the environmental factors, they may actually sort of lose custom and lose business. So these pestle factors, external factors, things around the edges, things that we can't necessarily directly influence, sometimes things that we have absolutely no control, but we do need to understand and respond to those, either at the start when we're looking to do something, or in mid-flight when something changes externally. Then that means we might need to review and reflect on what it means to our existing sort of strategy or plans. Okay, so let's look at those internal elements of the 4 dimensions. So organisations and people. So organisations and people is looking at, well, what is the impact of changing something? What is the impact of introducing something? Yeah, do we need new skills? Do we need to create a new team? Are we actually replacing an existing technology with something new? So we need to create a new support model. But what about the existing teams? What happens to those skills? Do we retrain? Yeah, can we reutilise those people? Okay, so very much organisations and people is looking at what's the impact from a proposed change, yeah, or improvement that has an impact on the organisation, whether it's in terms of structure, whether it's in terms of changes to roles, new roles, different skills. Okay. Also about the sort of, I guess it also covers things like leadership and communication and the culture of the organisation, and also things around governance. So governance is very much the what do we do, what are the rules that we follow, our policies, for example, our controls. Yeah. So are there changes to governance that might be required if we're looking to make a change to one of our products and services? So these are sort of considerations around that organisations and people dimension. Of course, technology, and technology has 2 sort of lenses here in terms of information technology. There's understanding what's the implications to the technologies we use to deliver our services, and what are the implications on the technologies that we use to manage our services. Okay, so big considerations around both of these will be around things like data, around security. Yeah, if we look at particularly tools we use, yeah, to manage the services we deliver, if we're looking to bring in a new tool, does it actually integrate with our existing sort of tool set architecture? Yeah. Or is it effectively a tool that we're going to have to build a lot of automation around it to actually get full value? Okay, lots of considerations around technology, whether it's technology to deliver or technology to manage through the tool sets that we use. So, does it support our long-term direction? Does it support the roadmap we have for our architecture? Yeah. Does it introduce maybe issues around controls and compliance if you're a regulated business? Yeah. Is it something that's got some investment protection? So we're buying a particular tool set for some functionality that we need sort of today, but actually there are features we can exploit in the fullness of time. Okay, so again, what features might we take advantage of in the future, which might again enhance maybe a business case for a new tool set. So we need to think through when we change technology, when we change tools, we need to think through the implications, and this dimension helps us to achieve that. Of course, for most organisations, as we said before, most organisations, they may consider themselves to be a provider, yeah, but they are also a consumer. So I guess increasingly today with sort of commoditised IT solutions, we can actually become dependent on a number of different suppliers. In this dimension, we need to consider what are the impacts when we're looking to change things, whether we're bringing in a new technology or bringing in a new tool set. What's the implications in terms of, what's the relationship going to be with this new supplier? Yeah. And what's the implication to the relationship we had with maybe the supplier who we're now exiting from our information technology sort of architecture? We need to think about what sort of relationship we want with our suppliers. So for many suppliers, we may have they provide us with goods, and we might have some form of contract in place for them to do that, okay? But our dependency may not be that high. But we may have some suppliers who actually are quite critical to our day-to-day service. Okay, so we probably want to see more formal agreements in place, with contractual obligations clearly defined, possibly with service credit and penalties should service be impacted over a period of time. And of course, there may be some suppliers who actually we want to go into some form of partnership. This is where we're working together. The concept of maybe a joint venture where two parties coming together can create something far stronger than if they try to do it in isolation. And this is this concept of maybe shared goals, shared risk, shared reward, where if we have a good day, you have a good day. If you have a bad day, we have a bad day. So this concept of a partnership, this shared risk and reward. So for all the different suppliers we have in place, that again, if we're changing things, we're bringing in new suppliers, we're taking some suppliers out, we need to think about the relationship we need, and of course put in place all the things that are going to be essential for the ongoing relationship with those suppliers and those partners. Okay. So we've looked at the 4 dimensions, but maybe let's just use an example to sort of bring it alive. Okay, so maybe let's think about we're going to replace our existing service management tool set with a new tool. It may be that our existing tool is quite dated, it perhaps doesn't have the functionality that we need. Maybe the vendor is no longer actually investing in that particular tool set, so yes, he'll support and maintain it, but there's no sort of roadmap for it. So for whatever reason, the time is right to move to something new. So how would we use the 4 dimensions? So we're introducing a new tool. Okay, so organisations and people, one of the obvious things would be, well, we've got people who are skilled and experienced in the old tool set. What happens to those individuals? What happens to those roles? Can we sort of, cross-train, cross-skill in terms of the new tool set? Or do we have some specific skills we have to bring in from the existing, from the external marketplace? Yeah. Are those resources scarce? So maybe we might need to look at a sort of support contract with maybe the vendor or a vendor partner to provide the specific skills and competencies to support and maintain and maybe develop the service management tool over a period of time. So those are just some of the initial organisations and people considerations using the 4 dimensions. Of course, we're implementing a new tool set. So in terms of our information technology, in terms of that dimension, some considerations. So what about the old tool set? What about the data within it? Yeah. So for some regulated organisations, that information recorded and maintained in the old tool, we need to be able to extract and keep and have access to for maybe 7 years for regulatory reasons. The new tool set, does it plug and play in that broader service and systems management architecture? So, can we plug it in and use it to interact with maybe event and monitoring tools in terms of dashboard reporting, etc., in terms of automated incident recording? Okay, and are there any compliance or security considerations we need to think about? Also, we might be looking to exploit certain features within the product, and there may be other features that we may plan to use in the future. So what future capability does the toolset potentially provide us, which might be useful in justifying the business case for the new tool? Okay, so again, just some of those considerations. Other things around a new vendor, due diligence. Is the vendor actually going to be around for a long time? Is there potential for a merger and acquisition where the existing vendor gets taken over and therefore that product may no longer figure sort of strategically in the new sort of merged organisation? So these are some considerations around information and technology. And then if we look at sort of value streams and processes, so with a lot of the modern service management tools, maybe the lexicon is different. Yes, a tool that's maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, some of the language has changed. Okay, little things, but people need to understand what the new lexicon is. One of the things a lot of the old tools allowed you to do was things that ITIL would not necessarily recommend as good practice. So you were able to do things. So some of your working practices, were sort of not, if you like, controlled or inhibited by the tool set. Quite a lot of the modern service management tools will talk about being based upon ITIL. So there may be things that you could do in the old tool that you can't do now in the new tool. Okay, so again, some changes to processes may arise as a result of the new tool set. And of course, again, simple things like user administration. So how, with the new tool, do people get registered to use the new tool set? What's the mechanism for changing access within the tool set? What's the mechanism when people leave to remove that access? So again, obvious considerations that we need to think about when implementing a new tool set. So again, the 4 dimensions helps us to think about those things. And then finally, partner and supplier. So we might be introducing a tool from a vendor that we have no existing relationship with. So we need to formalise that relationship. Yeah, we may be actually exiting a relationship with the old vendor. Okay, so we need to make sure that that's sort of closed down, in a formal way. Okay, there may well be suppliers, who we interact with day to day. So in terms of, our service desk may need to send a ticket to a supplier's service desk. Okay, so how's that going to work? How's that going to happen? When we've got this new tool set in place, that will need to be built in. And of course, when we think about organisations and people, going back again, so what's the training? What's the education that both our own people and our suppliers and partners will need when we change our tool set, because that might have an impact on them. Okay, so that's just a simple example of thinking holistically, around an example of implementing a new tool set. Okay, now hopefully it's shown that there are some considerations over and above just the technology itself that we need to consider, and that's the purpose of the 4 dimensions.